Today, I'm interviewing attorney Rick Collins, who is a friend of mine, and I first met years ago as we were both writing for Muscular Development together, and he's been writing for 20 years, Legal Muscle. Rick, nice to see you, man.
Doc, very nice to meet you in person after all this time.
Awesome. So today we are going to be discussing the interface of legally the medical world and the world of PEDs and steroids. It's going to come right together right here. First question. SARMs are out in the world and peptides are out in the world. They're mainly not agents of drugs, but doctors are prescribing some of these. Start and tell us what's going on with these SARMs and peptides in our world.
Okay. So everything that people want when it's no longer available will be sourced through some alternative. So when steroids became less and less available in pro-hormone products, the pro-hormones were taken off the market in 2014 or so by the Designer Anabolic Steroid Control Act. It gave an opportunity for folks who wanted to be more jacked and to buy products that would do that over the counter to get a hold of these SARMs. And SARMs is an acronym for Selective Androgen Receptor Modulator. It's a particular type of chemical. Ostarine is probably the most well-known one. They have some anabolic effects. The idea is that it will target and stimulate the muscle to grow, to have an anabolic effect in the muscle, instead of having it in places you wouldn't want it, like the prostate or other.
Hair.
Nobody wants a huge prostate, right?
Right. Or a heart attack.
Or a heart attack. Not good. So that's the idea.
And the gynecomastia and all these things.
Right, because they're less. The idea would be that they were less androgenic, so they wouldn't have some of those virilizing effects. So SARMs became popular kind of as a replacement for prohormones, and they were sold essentially in three ways. And peptides are just kind of not SARMs, but they're in that same category of chemicals that may have some anabolic or other cosmetic or aesthetic effects on people
cutting,
who might want to use them, whether it's cutting or some of them are sexual enhancers or things like that. So SARMs, peptides, all kind of became available in a couple of different ways. One is as a dietary supplement. So there were guys who were, and folks who were selling SARMs as dietary supplements. So it would be a product that was actually labeled Ostarine and would be on the market. You could go into a mom and pop health food store and you could pull that off the shelf and you could buy it. Not legal because they don't comply with the definition of what a dietary supplement is supposed to be. It's not an herb, it's not a botanical, it's not a vitamin, it's not a mineral, it's a SARM, it's a synthetic created compound. So that was one way that they were being sold. You can still see them sometimes in some stores, although the government has cracked down on that to some degree, and I've represented a number of folks who were selling SARMs as dietary supplements and got caught for it, right? So that's one category. Another category is something called research chemicals. Now, that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek way of sort of avoiding the law.
My lab rat.
Right. My lab rat wants this product. He wants this peptide. He wants this SARM. And so the way that it's kind of created a market is that people are trying to get around the idea that these are drugs, because under the definition of a drug, under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, it's something that's intended to affect the structure or function of the body other than a food, right? So if I'm selling something, I'm saying this is a peptide and it's going to make you bigger, it's going to make you leaner, it's going to change the way you look. Well, that would be the structure or potentially the function of the body. That's a drug, that's a no-no. So what some of the marketers said is, well, why don't we actually say it's for research, wink, wink.
Research.
So this way it's not a drug because I'm not selling it for that purpose. It's just for, lab rats or other, in vitro research or in vivo research. And so that became a market. That's been around for 20 years.
Does the Fed or the state, does any of these regulating agencies come in and say, where's your lab rat?
Yes. So some of these companies have gotten dinged. And what happens is the Food Drug FDA or some other agencies, sometimes postal inspectors, will go after these companies at some point. Usually there has to be a reason for why they do. And sometimes I can't figure out why they go after some and don't go after others. But I've represented at least a dozen people and their companies who were selling these research chemicals under circumstances that made it unbelievable that that was the purpose.
The
right?
veterinary lab rat.
Yeah, well,
supporting.
so if you're shipping the products to college dorms and to people's private residences, that's one sign. If you're advertising the products in a muscle magazine, yeah, I mean nobody's legitimate. The University of Arizona isn't getting its supplies for research out of right. So or if you're getting emails from young and huge guns at AOL.com, that's probably not a researcher. So they actually put all of this together and they make the claim. And sometimes they'll have an undercover agent interact and say, hey, look, the research chemicals you sent me, I've been using them, and what do you recommend for this?
They do that?
And sure, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, they do. So that's another. And then the third way that peptides are being sold is through the medical community, through physicians who are prescribing them. And so you're seeing peptides that are experimental. They're not
Which ones?
approved as drugs in the United States. So you're seeing some of these. There are a whole lot of different peptides now.
Ipamorelin and different.
So like Sermorelin is an
Sermorelin,
approved drug.
right.
So, but there are some cousins and other variations that are not approved.
Right.
There is something called BPC-157.
What about
There's
that?
something called TB-500.
Right.
And so there are other peptide components, peptide compounds that there's some research on, that some of it is animal research.
But doctors
so there are doctors
prescribing,
who are prescribing
but they
these
can't really
things.
prescribe it because it's really not FDA prescribable medicine.
They're being prescribed, and
Well, they're selling them, really.
So, but not for research. They're selling them, and
Human consumption.
as compounded drugs under a compounding pharmacy idea, and that's kind of an unusual kind
That's
of
new,
thing.
by the way.
It is.
5
It's
years ago, I didn't see that.
Probably not. It's probably new. It's probably within the last 5 years. And there are a lot of doctors and there are a lot of patients who swear by them. You probably have heard
Right.
there are people who are, and I'm not endorsing, but I'm saying that there are people who have taken BPC-157 and TB-500 and rave that their muscle tear healed in half the time.
I wish the stuff was 100 really true. I
Right.
think it might actually have some effects, but
Yeah, there's
no
probably
research.
not enough
Right.
research to know, but that bodybuilders are their own lab rats, right? I mean, they're willing to
Amazing.
try anything
Amazing.
that's going to either make them bigger, leaner, or recover faster.
all
right?
you guys out there,
So
some of you guys, not all.
So you see that, and
Correct.
And so that's a whole nother area that's going on now, and you don't really see FDA or the federal government going after the medical community involved in this because the FDA doesn't have jurisdiction over the practice of medicine. It does over drugs, but the practice of medicine is largely left to the states. So the individual states. Now, a state could look at this in some fugazi way. A person who is injured, suffers some injury or illness and claims that it was related to that particular prescription could file a civil lawsuit in that regard. So there's a number of different ways things can go poorly. But I think bodybuilders and people in the fitness community have always wanted to kind of take it that one extra step. They're always
Right.
trying to stay a step ahead of the medical community.
This is what you get with the Anabolic Doc app. Number one, a digital history and physical exam. Number two, weekly Zoom meetings with me. Number three, discounted commercial labs. Number four, weekly member-only uncensored videos. Number five, Anabolic Doc's mailbag. You can't come to the meetings or you don't want to come to the meetings, you ask a question, I'm going to respond to your question by making a video, put it back up on the app, and you get to see your own question. Lastly, diagnostic and management library that is easily searchable by keywords.